All right. Hello and welcome, everyone. If you are watching this, it means that you are seeing the live stream. So please ask any questions that you might have for us today in the chat as I go through our topic. I'm going to walk through some quick slides, and then I'm going to show you all a demo. And at the end of the demo, I'm going to circle back into the chat and answer all of your questions. So let us know in the chat where you're joining from. I see a lot of people saying hello. I'm curious where y'all are joining from. Are you participating in the National Cyber League? And what's your favorite topic from the practice gym? All right. So while everyone's getting settled in the chat, I'm gonna kick us off and we'll get started. Hello, I'm Franz Pear with Cyber Skyline, and today we are going to be analyzing SOAP logs. So SOAP is the Simple Object Access Protocol. It's often used to format data in web APIs, and it uses XML. That's the extensible markup language. It looks very similar to HTML if you're familiar with that, if you've done any web development. Now, this is kind of an older protocol. It's not as common in newer applications because it's using XML. I think you usually see it in a lot of like Windows-based, Microsoft-based applications, but a lot of more like recent applications, more common applications will use formatting with JSON rather than XML. And part of that is because XML is like very wordy. It takes up a lot of space. So looking at this log that we have to analyze today, it looks like some sort of debug log, and it has mixed data within each line. So you can see at the top, the first few lines here, those are just pure like debug information. So connecting to the server, and it's telling you that we're adding these different headers. And then we have the response, and then the request, and then to the side of this, to the right of that, is the actual raw data itself. And so what this means is that we're going to, down the line, have to just find a way to extract just the data, because it's going to make it a lot more difficult if we need to account for all of the other debug statements within this file. Now, if we take that highlighted XML from the previous slide and we put it in some sort of tool, a beautifier, to make it look a little bit more readable, this is what it looks like when you expand it. And so XML has this nested structure. At the top, we have this SOAP env envelope. So that is the top level element, the node. And then underneath that, you've got the header, you've got the body, and then within the body, you've got all the other different fields. You have these nested fields. And then what you can see is, in the case of this payment request, you can see payment action as a sale, payment detail, details here, and you can see an order total, like shipping address. All of this information can be found within the XML. Now, it's very difficult to see that when you're looking at this line where it's all kind of just squished right next to each other without any of the spacing. So what we'll need to do is first extract just the raw data that we need, and then subsequently figure out if there's a nicer way that we can format the data so that we can perform some additional analysis. So the steps that you should take to analyze the file, pretty straightforward. We're going to do the extraction by just selecting only the SOAP XML data. Once we get an XML file with just the SOAP data, then we can convert that into a CSV, so like a spreadsheet. And then we can perform the analysis on the spreadsheet. The reason why this is going to be helpful for you when you do your analysis is because when you're looking at that XML, even in the pretty view like this is, I actually have this simplified. I have the ... at the top there with the header. This is what you see when you look at just one entry. And so you can imagine if you're looking at thousands and thousands of entries, you're just going to have to scroll down this very, very long, like, string of text, right? And it's going to be very difficult to actually get a good sense of what's going on, what's happening from an aggregate level. And it also makes it harder for you to actually like have the data be something you can like perform functions on. So let's just say, for example, if you had all of your data just kind of in one giant stream like this, how could you easily figure out how many entries there are? You might have some like little tricks to figure out how to do that, but it's not immediately obvious. If you go to the very bottom of the file and you have like line numbers on that, the line number is not going to be the same as the number of entries in there. So you want to have this in a nicer format so that you can do something like perform a summation or do filtering. And trying to do filtering when it's in this format is kind of tricky. And so that's why we want to convert it into a CSV file. All right, so in order to actually do the extraction to XML, we will need to use regular expressions. Regular expressions, I think it's technically considered a language. It's a way for you to specify different patterns that you want to match on. And they can be a little bit tricky. And I highly recommend that you use some sort of visual regular expression tester, as it will make debugging a lot easier when you do this. So I have here a screenshot of regex 101. That's one of the tools I use. There's also regexer.com. I'm sure you can find a bunch of other tools. Use whatever you find is most helpful for you. But I would highly recommend that you use one of these tools as you're going through this process. It will make debugging a lot easier because you can see here, it has the highlighting in the green and the blue of telling me what's being matched and what's not being matched. Another thing to note is that regular expressions are tricky. It's very much not a beginner concept. It's more of an advanced concept. And even though I understand how they work, it still kind of takes a lot of me to wrap my brain around them. So oftentimes what I'll do is I will just go do an online search. Maybe I'll use ChatGPT and ask it, hey, here's the data that I have. Here's a line that I have. I'm trying to extract just this part. Can you write me a regular expression to parse out just that part? And I find that oftentimes ChatGPT can help me with that. But a lot of common things like extracting IP addresses, URLs, those are things where if you do a quick Google search, you can get like a Stack Overflow or some other forum post, which will have a pre-made regular expression that you can use. So I personally almost never create regular expressions from scratch. I'm usually using something that I found online, and then I'm going to use a tool like regex 101 to actually do my testing to make sure that they're working properly. Because of course, you don't want to just assume that whatever you find on the internet works. You want to make sure that you are verifying that thoroughly. Okay, so the next step that we have to kind of cover is actually extracting the XML from the data, from the file. And so we're going to use this program called SED. You can see that highlighted here. SED is the stream editor program. It's a very useful tool for manipulating text data, and you can use it to extract these requests from the log file and the responses from the log file. And so walking through this command that we have here, we have this -n option that prevents SED from printing every single line in the file, because we only want to print out the lines that have the requests or the responses. Remember, there are those other debug lines within that file. Now, the -r option enables the use of extended regular expressions, which we're going to make use of in our capture groups. Inside these single quotes here, we have our actual instructions that we're sending over to SED. And the -s indicates that we want to perform a substitution. Sorry, not the -s, just the s. That's the indication for the substitution. In between the first set of forward slashes here, that is the what for what we are substituting. And so breaking this down, we have this PP API service, and then you've got the request or the response. That's what we want to be matching. We want to be matching only lines, right? The highlighted, just those lines that contain at the beginning the PP API response or the PP API request. And then we want to ignore all those other lines, right? So the ones that just say PP HTTP connection, we skip those lines. We don't want those. We just want the responses and the requests. Now, with specifically the responses, I don't know why this is the case, but when I was looking at the file, I noticed that the responses had this XML tag at the beginning, and for some reason the requests did not have the XML tag. I would assume that they would have been added for both, but for some reason it's just the responses. And so specifically for our request to extract out the responses, we need to match on that XML tag. And that's what we have here in that highlighted area. Next, we have our capture group that's within the parentheses in our command here. And what this is going to do is it's going to select everything that follows what came before, right? So for the request, it goes all the way up until that space that I have highlighted here. And so the first thing that would be matched is this SOAP env envelope in lowercase, like the SOAP env is lowercase because the request is on this second highlight. In the case of the response, it comes after that initial XML tag. So that would be the SOAP env capitalized. So the parentheses says we want to capture the results that we are matching. And then that dot indicates any character and the star says wildcard. So we're going to match everything that follows and that'll go to the end of the line. All right, so that's our match. Next is what follows is the actual thing that we are substituting, right? So we matched everything in the forward slashes, the first set of forward slashes. Then we want to substitute, and what we want to substitute in our case here is the capture group. So what we have in those parentheses, that is what we want to substitute each line with. So the entire line we matched on this PPAPI service response or PPAPI service request. That's part of matching a line, but we don't want that. We want to remove that from our results. We just want what we have in our parentheses, that capture group there. And we only have a single capture group, so that's going to be capture group number 1, and that's what that /1 is going to indicate. So we're going to replace the entire line with just what is highlighted. And then afterwards, we have the P, the /P, and that indicates that anything that matches here, that's the line that we want to print out. Because if you remember at the beginning, we had this -N option, which said don't print out the lines by default. And so we need to provide this P option here to specify that anything that matched, any line that matched our command here, we want to print that out. And then what follows is the, we're specifying to sed, hey, we want to open the payments.log file. That's where you're getting your data from. And then for the request, we want to save that into requests.xml. And for the responses, we want to save that in responses.xml. Now, that was a lot. If this seemed kind of complicated, you're not sure like how this works, don't be scared. I didn't know either. I've used sed a lot, but I don't understand it fully. And so this is another time where I'd highly recommend, going online, doing some Google searches. In this case, I actually asked ChatGPT, hey, just like with the regular expression, I'm looking for a command using sed. Can you write this command for me? And it wrote the command for me. But I made sure that when I got that from ChatGPT, I started looking at it and I wanted to make sure I understood every single part of this command. And in this case, I actually went and asked ChatGPT to help explain it for me, to me as well. And so I have my 2 commands. That's what it's doing. And this just goes to show that if you are able to have this critical mindset, you can use a lot of these different tools to help you figure out the specific details of how you get from point A to point B. In this case, the high-level strategic thinking was trying to figure out how am I, like what I need to do is I need to extract this XML data out of the file, right? I need to be able to do that. How do I do that? Well, there's 1,000,001 different tools. I'm not immediately familiar with something. Let me go and try to figure out if there's a quick way that I can do this. And that's what I was able to accomplish with these 2 sed commands, which I was able to obtain by just asking ChatGPT to help me out here. All right, so now that we've extracted the data, there's actually one last step which we need to do to modify those XML files that we just created. So what we need to do is we need to add an XML open tag and an XML close tag at the beginning and at the end of both of these files. And the reason for this is because when we performed the extraction, we put a single XML node on each line of that file. And so these are all separate XML nodes. And the XML tree structure requires that all of these separate elements, even though they're on their own line, they need to be contained within a single node. XML does not like it when you have a file that has, it's expecting to have one XML node as the parent, and then everything else, all the other XML nodes are descendants of that single parent node. And so we need to create the single parent node, which is going to contain all of the rows, all of the individual XML nodes as the children of our singular XML node. And so that is what adding the XML tag open and close to the beginning and to the bottom of the file is going to do. So we have our new sed command over here. In this case, -I indicates that we're going to do an in-place edit of the file. So we're going to edit the file directly. We're not going to create a new one. -E over here specifies that we have these two separate edit commands. And the first edit command is going to add the XML open tag to the start of the file. So that's a 1I. That's a insert on line 1, this XML. And then the second one is going to add the closing XML tag. That is the $A is for the append. So append means to put at the end of a file. And then we put the XML here. And note that we do need to escape, do an escape sequence to our /XML, the closing XML tag. All right. And then we have the star.xml, and that's because we have two XML files, one for the requests and one for the responses. So hopefully that was a useful overview for you. Now we're going to switch into the demo. All right. So I'm over here with my Kali machine, and I have, I've clicked on my admin feature. I have in my my challenge interface here, I have the log file that we're analyzing. This is the scenario, and we have these different questions. So we need to figure out how many transactions are contained in this log file, what is the transaction ID of the largest purchase made in the log, and which state made the greatest number of purchases. So these are 3 questions. So putting what we just did in the slides to the test, I am over here with my log file, and I'm going to delete all of my earlier tests that I did. So I'm going to delete those. We have our payments.log, and our first sed command. So our first sed command here is going to be parsing out those requests and saving that into our requests.xml. Then we have our responses.xml. So this sed command is going to go and take all those responses. Remember, there's the little bit of the extra XML tag at the beginning that we need to be cognizant of. That is this over here. We're going to save that into responses.xml. And now if I open, let's just say requests.xml, I can see here, I'm going to set numbers so you can see the line numbers. So line 1, just line 1 alone takes up the entire screen. It's very wordy. So we have our XML element, our node here, the SOAP env envelope. So that's the first line. The next line is another envelope. If I just keep going down here, you can see that every single line is a XML element. However, these are not contained within the XML tags. So one option you could do, you could just manually add an XML, like XML tags to the beginning and to the end of, to the end of the file, just manually. You could do that. But we also have our sed command here to do that for us. And so when I do that sed command, and now I open requests.xml again, I can see at the top, we have this XML tag, which will contain all of these child elements inside of it. And then we have our XML, our closing XML tag at the very bottom. So technically, if we wanted to format this correctly, we should be doing an indentation like that, where the XML element is indented. Or sorry, the XML like top element is not indented, and all the children are indented. But thankfully for us, that is not required for XML to work. But I now have this XML file. If what I'm going to do is I'm just going to I'm going to print this out again, and I'm going to show you what this looks like if I took this and I copied it, and I go to, let's just say I search for a we search for a XML beautifier, so we can print it all nice. If I paste that into here, I think I might have missed part of my copy. So something didn't, I must have missed something in the copy and paste, but you can see here that it will put this in the nice indented structure, and we have just the raw data that we are looking for. And also we have a lot of ads. So reminder that ad block is a helpful tool when you're using the internet. So we now have all of this data, but we want to be able to answer these questions. How many transactions are contained in the log? What's the transaction ID of the largest purchase in the log? And what state has the greatest number of purchases? So this first question, we're actually better suited to answer this first question now that we have it as an XML file, because if I go to my requests.xml and I get my line numbers displayed here, I can see that every line has a single request. And so if I just count how many lines are in here, I'll get the number of requests. I just have to remember to subtract two, one for the XML tag that we added at the beginning and one for the XML closing tag that we added at the end. So looking at that, we have 194 minus 2. Our answer should be 192. So hopefully that is correct. Perfect. So we answered our first question here. The next question is asking for the transaction ID of the largest purchase made in the log. That is not something that we can easily calculate from here, right? Like we would have to do another extraction to get, I guess, just these values here, the numeric values here for the dollar amount. And then we have to figure out the largest one. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do a conversion from the XML into a CSV file, because if I had these, if each one of these different fields inside the XML was instead a column, I know I could use Google Sheets or some other spreadsheet editor to more easily get the answers to these questions. So I'm going to choose my requests.xml, open that up, and then it did the conversion for me. And I'm just going to copy the results here. Try not to click on an ad by accident. So I copy that, and I should be able to just paste it in here. So I now have a spreadsheet with my requests, right? That was the requests. And then now I'm going to do the responses. Scroll all the way down to the bottom. Copy that, new tab, responses, and now I can paste that right in here. Perfect. So we now have our spreadsheet, which has one with the requests and one with responses. Now from here, if I try to answer this question, what is the transaction ID of the largest purchase made in the log? So if I go in here and I add a filter, what I could do is look for the purchase amount. So let's go and find that. Oh, wait, I'm looking at the responses. No, I want to be looking at the requests. So we are going to create a filter, and this is the field for the order total. And so what I will do, and let me zoom in a little bit to make this a little bit easier for people to see here. So this is the field for the order total. And I'm just going to sort this in descending order. So the top one here should be the largest value. Just confirm that. If I go to the very bottom, the cheapest one is $4. That looks like it's correct. And then the top one is $998.6. So this looks like the correct one. And the question was asking for the transaction ID. So now I need to go and find the transaction ID field. So which one is the transaction ID? Maybe it's in the responses. Yes, it's in the responses. Okay. Yeah, the transaction ID is within the responses. So we need to find the corresponding response for that request. Okay. So if we want to do that, I'm going to undo my sort. Okay, so we're looking for this transaction with this value 998.6. 998.6. This is on line 53. I go here, line 53. Okay, so line 53, and now we need to get the transaction ID from line 53. All right, it looks like this one. Oops, oh, okay, I took it. Well, I didn't copy and paste that correctly, but I think for this question, we accept both the transaction ID and the largest purchase amount. And then we now are on the last question for which state made the greatest number of purchases. So for the greatest number of purchases, we go to the requests because this had state information. So we have the state or province. And then I believe if I go to data and I do column stats, this will actually give me a statistical analysis of the data. And you can see frequency count here. MA has 8 as the highest frequency. So I can come in here and I type in MA. And there we go. So that is how you parse out the XML from this log file and then convert the XML into a CSV file so that you can perform a proper log analysis. All right, so now I'm going to go into the chat. For those of you in the chat still, do you have any questions about any of that? Anything I can walk through a little bit further? Another quick pro tip actually is don't make sure you double check all of your like debugging with running these commands and everything. I showed the regex tester in the slides. I highly recommend that you use something like that. When I did this demo today, I already had the commands and the regex to kind of walk through. When you're doing this yourself, you're going to have to go and get that, right? You can ask ChatGPT, you can ask the internet. There's a good chance that ChatGPT is wrong or the internet is wrong. So it will be very frustrating if you just take what it gave you and use it for like, take it for granted, be like, yep, that's totally what it is. And then you run your commands and then you get the data and then like, you get the answer wrong. And the reason why the answer is wrong is that because it didn't parse the data out correctly. And so you want to make sure that you you verify that the parsing, the results that you're getting are correct before you do the full analysis, because you're gonna have a hard time otherwise. Cassie's asking, can you show how you converted the data into the spreadsheet again? Sure. So I actually just, the fun thing I did here was I just typed in XML to CSV converter. That's all I did. And so after I ran those sed commands, so it was, and I'm gonna make sure this is visible again. So the SOAP command for the request to save that in an XML file, and then the response to save that in an XML file. I now have these two XML files, and then I have the other sed command to add the XML tag at the beginning and at the end of the files. And then if I go to my downloads folder over here, I have this request.xml and the responses.xml. I went onto Google, found this XML to CSV converter. Make sure you find a reputable source and don't give yourself a virus. Also, keep in mind that when you're uploading data to a random website like this, you have absolutely no idea what they might be doing with that data. So for the purposes of this exercise, it doesn't matter. But when you're looking at anything that might be company information, private information, any sort of sensitive information, I would use a reputable tool that runs on your own computer and not upload it to some random website. But I was able to choose a file, select the file there, and then it did the conversion for me. And then I just copied and pasted this table and put this into a Google Sheet. All right, that looks like all of the questions in the chat. Hope you all found that informative. And if you're participating in the NCL, good luck in the games that are coming up here in a couple of weeks. And until next time, I'll see you all later.